the crimes they tried to bury twice. Imagine the dead stirring in their graves, not from myth, but from politics. Picture priests and soldiers slipping into tombs, chiseling away names, smashing statues, burning records. These were Egypt's darkest cover-ups, crimes so dangerous they weren't buried once, they were buried twice. First, with bodies in the earth, then again in memory, as if they had never existed. But history leaves echoes, and in those echoes, the truth claws back to the surface. Tonight, we unearth the scandals, murders, and betrayals that Egypt's rulers tried to erase forever. Her name was Hatshepsut. She wasn't content to rule as Queen Regent. She crowned herself Pharaoh, the first woman to seize Egypt's throne outright. For 20 years, she wore the royal beard, stood before the gods, and led Egypt into peace and prosperity. She built temples, launched expeditions to far-off lands, filled her coffers with incense and gold. But when she died, her stepson Thutmose III took his revenge. Statues toppled, walls hacked, her name erased from the king's list, her face gouged off monuments, her memory condemned to oblivion. Why? Because her reign proved a woman could hold absolute power, and that was a crime too dangerous to let survive. To Egyptians, erasing your name meant erasing your afterlife. Hatshepsut wasn't just murdered in memory, she was condemned to eternal death. But some rulers weren't erased after death. They were erased while still alive. Akhenaten, a pharaoh who dared break 2,000 years of tradition. He shut down temples, stripped the priests of their power, and declared a new religion, worship of a single god, Aten, the sun disk. It was nothing less than heresy. His city, Amarna, was built in glory, a radical vision carved into desert stone. But after his death, it was abandoned like a plague site. His statues smashed, his name gouged out, his memory purged. Even his children weren't spared. Records of his daughters vanish. And what of his queen, Nefertiti? Once the most powerful woman in the empire, she disappears from history. No tomb, no body, no inscription. Was she erased too? Akhenaten wasn't just deleted. He was turned into a ghost, a pharaoh history tried to pretend never existed. But in the chaos he left behind, another shadow appeared. A pharaoh so mysterious that his very existence is still debated. Smenkhare, a name that drifts like smoke through the records. Some say he was Akhenaten's brother. Others claim he was Nefertiti in disguise. Whoever he was, he ruled only a year, then vanished. His monuments were smashed, his images destroyed. His mummy has never been identified. Was he erased by loyalists of the old gods, or was he too closely tied to Akhenaten's heresy? The silence is deafening. Smenkhare's reign was buried so thoroughly that even Egyptologists struggle to prove he existed. Here lies the perfect crime, not just the death of a pharaoh, but the death of certainty itself. But some kings weren't erased by mystery, they were erased by murder. Tutankhamun, to us, the glittering boy king, to his enemies, an obstacle. At just 18, Tut died suddenly, too suddenly. Scans reveal a shattered skull, a broken ribcage, a crushed leg. Some experts believe he was struck from behind, assassinated. And yet, the cover-up was swift. His tomb was small, hastily painted, likely meant for someone else. Advisors swooped in. One married his widow, another took his throne. But they didn't just bury Tut. They buried the truth. His reign was barely recorded. His name slipped into silence until Howard Carter cracked open his tomb 3,000 years later. Tut was forgotten. Even his burial may have been sabotaged. Studies suggest his body was burned in the coffin. Whether by accident or deliberate desecration remains a mystery. Tutankhamun's murder wasn't just a killing. It was the perfect political crime, concealed by gold, erased by silence. But even kings and queens weren't the only victims. Some crimes were buried under mountains of stone, the silent graves of the builders. For centuries, the pyramids were seen as monuments to eternity. But listen closely, and they're also monuments to suffering. Tens of thousands of workers, not slaves in chains, but peasants taxed into forced labor, toiled under the burning sun. They hauled limestone for decades, starved from impossible levees, many dying in the dust. Most were buried in anonymous pits. No names, no prayers, no afterlife. Forgotten twice, first in life, then in history. At Giza, archaeologists uncovered modest workers' tombs, revealing broken bones that healed poorly, spines crushed from years of carrying stone. Their stories, erased until recently, whisper of lives consumed for monuments they'd never enjoy. The Pharaoh's glory wasn't built by gods. It was built by broken backs, erased voices, and silent graves. And behind it all, another hand was at work. Not a pharaoh's, but something darker. For centuries, pharaohs wore the crowns. But who truly ruled Egypt? The priests of Amun. They controlled the temples, the rituals, the gold. Without them, no soul could reach the afterlife. They could crown pharaohs or erase them. They could condemn a king's memory to dust. By the 21st dynasty, they no longer hid in shadows. They seized power outright, crowning themselves as rulers. Even mighty Ramses' descendants bowed to them. Pharaohs became puppets, figureheads propped on thrones, while priests pulled the strings. The greatest cover-up of all was not a single erased pharaoh, but the illusion that pharaohs ever ruled alone. They buried their enemies in tombs. They buried their names in silence. They thought time itself would obey them. But history has a way of speaking, even when silenced. These were the crimes they tried to bury twice. And yet, across millennia, the echoes remain. Because history never dies. It just echoes.